Hindu Business Line, to welcome the gathering and take us through why he thinks it's important for us to have these discussions. Please, Srini.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Business Line's Countdown to the Union Budget. Let me at the outset say how glad I am to be in Mumbai today and in this building. I am based in Chennai now, but I consider Mumbai my hometown. I lived here for 18 years. And I remember coming to this hall in 1989 as a junior reporter in the Times of India. I used to be standing in the gallery, which is now blocked up by air conditioning, and watch live trading in this hall and report on it. So it's really nice to be back in this place. It was a very special place. This hall and this building, they occupy a special place in India's economic history. They occupy a special place in my memories and my personal history, and it's really good to be here. This is the second year that we are doing this sort of discussion. And the reason why we do it is that we feel it is important to set the context for what will follow very shortly. We do not, of course, presume to dictate to the government or the finance minister. But we do hope that the powers that be take on board some of the takeaways from these kind of gatherings and the discussions which take place. Because we are a democracy, and consultation is a very critical component of the democratic process. You cannot take decisions for a $2 trillion budget sitting in an ivory tower under the impression that you know everything which is going on. Equally so, we cannot dictate or direct the same kind of decisions sitting in our ivory towers of editorial cabins and deciding what is wrong with the world. I think there has to be a neutral platform where different kinds of views come together, engage in productive discussion, and come up with conclusions and action plans as to the way forward. And that's what we hope to achieve through these conclaves. Last year was our first attempt at doing so. This year, this is the second in Mumbai. We just had one in Chennai as well, and subsequent to this, we'll be doing the same event in Delhi. And my personal experience has been that some of the points which get made by industry players out here do get notice, and that's really, in that sense, media playing its role as it should be. This year's budget, of course, comes at an extremely critical juncture. I think we are at an inflection point in our economic development in more ways than one. You might have read in yesterday's Business Line that India lost tag of being the world's fastest growing economy. It is expected to now be the second fastest growing in the year ahead, losing place to China. Our growth forecast, the numbers vary a little bit. There's a plus minus 1% difference in the actual numbers, but everybody has consistently reduced the growth forecast by about 1%, external forecasters. Our own government forecast released by the CSO is far more optimistic. But, you know, why do these numbers matter? They are critical. Actually, these numbers decide how the budget is shaped. The finance minister, when he plans his spending for the coming year, takes into account certain revenue projections. And those revenue projections are based on growth projections. And if the growth projections are wrong, as they have been several times in the past, it can lead to serious mismatches between actual receipts and expenditure. And we have seen the damage that kind of development can cause. Uh, the problem with the budget is that while the budget event itself makes a lot of noise and grabs a lot of attention, people tend to lose interest in what happens afterwards. And it's important to actually look at the revised estimates and the actual numbers, which are released sometimes with a lag of 12 months, to see what actually happened. And what actually had been happening for several years is that the actual spends had to be severely curtailed because revenue projections did not live up to reality, which meant that there was a severe cutback in so-called planned expenditure, because non-planned expenditure is expenditure which cannot be, by and large, foregone, wages, salaries, pensions, and so on, everything which goes towards keeping the wheels of administration turning. And a cutback in capital expenditure is one of the reasons why we are hitting this slowdown in growth right now. Our gross domestic capital formation, both government and private sector, is at a historic low. This also means that even if things improve this year, future growth is likely to be lower, because you're not invested for the future growth to happen. If you're not making capital investments right now, the future expansion and future growth is not going to happen. Which means that low growth is going to be the new normal. Of course, our base has become much larger. We've had a very painful but very historic demonetization exercise, which is still in the throes of being completed. But demonetization is likely to have a decisive impact on a number of things, not the least of which could be the way future budgets also shape up, because as more and more of our economy gets digitized, more and more comes into digital transactions, and therefore into audit trails, and therefore into the tax net, maybe we are looking at multiple possibilities, a possibility of sustained and reasonable levels of taxation, because if your tax coverage is wide enough, you don't need a high rate of tax. At the moment, we have a narrow base of taxpayers supporting a very large section of non-taxpayers. So there are a number of changes underway like this. So demonetization is just one of the X factors which has been introduced. GST is going to be the other. They have more or less negotiated the final points of difference on GST. GST will be a reality, if not by July, which the government hopes it will be, but definitely by September of the coming financial year. Therefore, that fundamentally alters the way the economy will work, the way businesses do what they do, and how the government gets its money. Again, these all tie back into the budget. Given all these imponderables, it's very, very critical that this particular budget moves in the right direction, takes into account the potential outcomes of these decisions which have just been taken, demonetization, GST, and sets the base for the future. But how do we do that? And I think that's one of the things that we hope to arrive at in the discussions that we have today. all of you in the industry also know the specific problems that industry itself is facing. Um, it has been discussed at length, but actual solutions are still slow to emerge. So one of the reasons for the slowing, capital formation was the fact that, credit availability was reducing. Credit availability was reducing because of a rising NPA problem, which in turn constrains corporates' ability to invest. So how do you cut that Gordian knot? How do we break that cycle? Will the sort of 14 or 15 lakh crores that banks have got in the way of deposits actually lead to the breaking of this chain and a restarting of the lending and investment cycle? We hope that it will be the case, but if that has to happen, what needs to be done? What kind of measures does the finance minister have to take in order to sort of create this new virtual cycle? I think these are the questions for which we are looking for answers. I know for a fact that, this sounds a little bit like boasting, but I do know that the business line is taken fairly seriously in decision-making circles. And that's partly because of our long track record of neutrality. So which may not make us very popular in some quarters, but it does make us somewhat respected. And I do hope that today's deliberations will add to that as well. In good measure, we have a number of outstanding speakers here today. I'm looking forward to the discussions and the takeaways from those discussions. Before I conclude, I wish to also, record our grateful thanks for our many partners who made this event possible. Shriram Commercial Vehicle Finance, LIC Housing Finance Limited, our exchange partner, BSE, which has provided this wonderful venue, and as well as our session partners, GIC and ESC. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a few hours of intriguing and interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini. Today's panel discussions will be in two sessions. The first will be on the infrastructure sector, and the second on the emerging digital economy. So without further ado, I think we should start with our first panel discussion. I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Raghuveer Srinivasan, Senior Associate Editor, Businessline, who will be moderating the discussion. Welcome, Raghuveer. For the infrastructure panel, we have Mr. Vibhav Kapoor, Group Chief Investment Officer, Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services Limited. Mr. Kapoor is primarily responsible for the group's overall investment decisions, manages the proprietary equity portfolio, and makes strategic investment choices through joint ventures, public offers, and divestments. Welcome, Mr. Kapoor. Next, we have Mr. Pawan Agarwal, Chief Analytical Officer, CRISIL Ratings. Mr. Agarwal maintains the analytical quality in the ratings business for CRISIL and chairs the agency's rating committee. He has also led operations at CRISIL's Global Analytical Center, which provides support to Standard & Poor's global analytical and data teams in high-end analytical research and complex modeling assignments. Welcome, Mr. Agarwal. Next, we have Mr. Padmanabhan Nair, President, International Business, Infrastructure Development Corporation, Karnataka Limited, an associate company of IDFC. Mr. Nair has had a 30-year stint in financial services, banking, and infrastructure business development and execution. Before joining IDC, he was involved in the Gujarat Infrastructure Fund and the government funding aspects of toll projects like Vadodara Halol and Ahmedabad Mehsana. Welcome, Mr. Nair. Finally, we have Mr. S. Sitharasam, CEO, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust Special Economic Zone. Before joining JNPT, Mr. Sitharasam worked with the Maharashtra government's Airport Development Corporation, developing the Nagpur airport as a cargo and passenger hub, after which he was vice president at Tata Steel's Special Economic Zone in Bhubaneswar. Welcome, sir. Over to you, Raghuvi. We look forward to a very vibrant discussion.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel discussion, which I hope will be interesting, and you'll take back a lot of value from this at the end of an hour of discussions. This union budget is unique in more ways than one. For one, this is the first time we are going to have a combined budget for the railways and the general budget. We are also advancing the budget date by a whole month to the 1st of February. There is not going to be a distinction between plan and non-plan expenditure estimates in the budget for the first time. This is also the first budget after demonetization and the last one before GST kicks in. Hopefully, I think there is no escaping that given the constitutional limitation of GST to be in place by September. So, a landmark budget in more ways than one, and especially in the context of what happened on November 8th and the developments subsequent to that. There are conflicting expectations. There are some who feel that Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Modi will combine to offer what you call as SOPs to people who have been affected in the last couple of months, standing in long lines for drawing their own money, sometimes coming back empty-handed. There is another view that the Modi government, having completed half its term and nothing much to show for it in economic terms, nothing great to show, might shift paths and go to the welfare model and probably go back to handouts and entitlements-based approach to government finances and budgeting. One of the biggest planks on which Mr. Modi came to power was on job creation. But the last 2.5 years, we have not seen any change in that scenario. If anything, it's been in the negative rather than a growth in jobs. So given this context, this budget is going to be very important because the next one will be closer to the elections, and this is the one budget where Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley may have the chance to do what they want to do. Really go out there and play on the front foot, so to say. Whether they adopt a welfare model, whether they go to a SOPs-based approach for people affected, one thing that everybody agrees on is that the government has to increase spending on infrastructure. That is probably the way to go and kickstart growth again, especially growth that has come to a standstill in the last 2-3 months. The gentlemen with me here on the panel represent different sectors of the infrastructure segment. We have experts on financing, we have experts on ports, we have experts on public-private partnerships here. And I propose to first ask each one of them to speak for 5 to 7 minutes on specific points in their agendas, and come back to them with questions after that. And at the end of which, the last 10 minutes, we will have an open house for the audience to ask questions. I request the panelists to stick to the 5 to 7 minute deadline so that it's easier and everybody gets a chance to speak and present his views. I will start with Pavan Agarwal. Infrastructure financing is a big issue in this country, and we need lakhs of crores of rupees, and there are not well-developed markets to generate that kind of resources. Now, how would you think, and let me also point out that not everything has to be pegged to the budget. The budget is at the end of the day one event in the economic calendar. So, and not everything that the government does is done in the budget. It's done outside of the budget as well. So while you may want to peg your views on what the budget should have, feel free to talk in a more extended time frame. And Pawan, if you could just set the ball rolling on what you see as the gaps in infrastructure financing in this country.
Yeah, thank you, Raghu. I think I'll just take the cue from your opening remarks about the budget, the need from the government or the budget to take a lead in spending for infrastructure. I think clearly at a time like this, when the demand creation or private investment is the need of the hour, I think till the time that happens, it is important that the government steps in. And if you look at last year, clearly we've seen a lot of government spending happening towards policy-oriented sectors in infrastructure especially. You look at renewable sector, you look at the new initiatives and investments that are happening in the road side, a lot of investments that are underway in the railways sector, a lot of initiatives again in the airport kind of a sector. So continuation of what we have already seen as the ball being set rolling towards infrastructure finance, infrastructure investments by the government, I think would be important till the time actually the private investment picks up. And more importantly, in addition to making sure that the government spends, I think it is equally important that the government does it in a manner which is more balanced, which means that from an infrastructure perspective, again, if you look at, we need predictability for a longer period of time, which means that there may be a pressure on the government to perhaps deviate away from their fiscal deficit targets to spend more on infrastructure. But I think at the same time, more predictability in how the government handles its own finances creates an environment which is more conducive to infrastructure. So for example, if the government is fiscally more disciplined, which we have seen as a path the government continues to be, that sets the process of transmission of, let's say, interest rates, making sure that inflation remains under control or the macroeconomic environment remains conducive enough for continued long enduring levels of low inflation, leading therefore to lower interest costs and therefore leading to bond markets which are critical for development of infrastructure financing.
Before you go into the bond markets, you spoke about the fiscal deficit and the compulsion for government spending on infrastructure. What do you think is the right approach for the government in this context? Should they forget about the fiscal deficit temporarily and go out and spend more to rejuvenate the economy, or should they be weighed down by fiscal concerns?
I would again say that a balance is what is needed. I think without cutting down on infrastructure funding, there are innovative ways of figuring out how do you invest while making sure that the path to the fiscal discipline that the government has outlined be at least continued to be treaded cautiously. And again, in that context, if you look at what we have seen is the bond markets, new instruments, new kind of vehicles, they are stepping in to fill in some of the infrastructure requirements. Just to give you a little picture of the overall requirements, our estimate is infrastructure spending requirements for the country are about 43 lakh crore till the year 2020. Banks have led the infrastructure financing in the country all these years. But I think it is time, given the balance sheet and the capital constraints, that alternative funding mechanisms be created. And therefore, bond markets need to play or step into that. And we expect that close to 10-11 lakh crore out of this funding needs to come from the bond market. And that is already beginning to happen. If we look at a few years ago, the initiatives the government had on infrastructure debt funds. Today, our expectation is that the 3 infrastructure debt funds on the NBFC side together will cross 10,000 crore of assets by the end of this year, or maybe a little more. Something which is just a 3-year-old kind of a concept. we are expecting that InvITs will become reality this year. We have just rated the first InvIT that is being proposed to be listed now on the exchanges. So there are innovative ways in which funding is happening. One of the ways we expect some policy support to happen from the government is to have some kind of a bond enhancement guarantee kind of a fund. This is again government has been thinking of and articulating, but making sure that projects that are today rated low are able to access the bond market through a guarantee fund where a guarantee comes in. New kinds of structures are possible. I think that will be one critical part of where the policy measures we expect to continue. The second area I want to speak about is again, how do we look at new innovative ways of making infrastructure projects come directly to the financial markets. And in consultation with the government and other stakeholders, we have recently launched what we call as a new scale for infrastructure projects ratings. Typically, if you look at infrastructure projects, have the constraint of in the initial years, cash flows which are not, which are tightly matched vis-a-vis debt repayments. And therefore, when you look at it from a traditional perspective, you always have infrastructure projects that are rated in a triple B, maybe A category, even after they become commercially operational. What we have done now is to create a scale based on an expected loss over the entire life cycle of the project, rather be constrained by the need for the default probability assessment, which is what the traditional scale essentially looks at. And we believe that if you supplement the traditional ratings which are there from a AAA to triple B to below scale with this expected loss scale, which is EL1 to EL7, where EL1 represents lowest expected loss during the time frame of the entire project. I think it can provide additional supplementary confidence to the investors or lenders to distinguish between projects that may be rated triple B, but over the life of the project may have characteristics or viability which is different, and therefore provide that additional confidence in terms of providing that financing. I think that's where the next year some policy support, some initiatives to make sure that this also becomes reality from a lender's, investor's perspective would be another element from the budget side.
Excellent. Let's hope your new ratings product helps infrastructure borrowers as much as it helps lenders. I'll turn to you, Mr. Kapoor, now. Where do you think, which are the areas where the government should be focusing on when it comes to infrastructure? Infrastructure is such a broad definition, but within that, where would you think the government should invest more to get more jobs created and a trickle-down effect in the economy as well?
Yeah, thank you, Raghu. Let me start with this fact that I think that a single budget really cannot solve all the infrastructure problems of the country. And we've had this infrastructure now as a focus point for several years. So several budgets have gone by. And the governments, successive governments have done over a period of time, they've, resolved some of the issues. They've brought in some innovative methods of financing, et cetera, et cetera. But finally, we find at the end of what, maybe 10 years or whatever, that there's still a lot of problems which have not been resolved. New problems have been created, actually. And we've seen this issue of stranded projects, for example, last 3 years, 4 years, which have led to huge amount of NPAs in the banking system. And that's become a new problem now, how to get out of that problem. Banks are in terrible shape, some of them at least. So I don't think a single budget can really, change the whole picture. And particularly this year, in the light of this demonetization issue, and therefore the need for government to probably give out some SOP, some tax incentives to middle class, to corporates. And then we have the FRBM Act, which says from 3.5 you have to go down to 3% this year. That's 0.5%, quite a lot. Fortunately, tax revenues are still good, and therefore, it shouldn't be that much of a problem, but how much more of planned expenditure can the government do? And whether they should, you rightly pointed out whether they should do 3.5, remain at 3.5 and spend more, or go to 3, and, then you don't have the enough funds to spend on planned expenditure. As it is, we've seen last 5 years, planned expenditure has been growing at a very nominal rate, I think some 3 or 4% per year. So that's a big issue, I think, which really needs to be watched out as far as this budget is concerned, as to what stance the government takes in this respect. But as I said, there are, I think the role of a budget or the role of the government is really to make, as they say, as this government has been saying, business easy. And that's equally true for the infrastructure sector as it is for, maybe more true for the infrastructure sector than for any other sector. So they have to play a conducive role to see to it that some of the problems which have been there of late, particularly last few years, get resolved. Now, what are these problems? So if you look at some of, they'll depend from, of course, vary from sector to sector, but some of them, the big ones, for example, land acquisition, we've seen, particularly in roads, has been a major issue. Dispute resolution has been, I think, one of the most serious issues. Now, some parts of that have been resolved through the new Arbitration Act, etc. But that's something which the government needs to look at. Then, obviously, you have claim management. I believe, a lot of companies in the infrastructure sector have huge amounts of claims which have not got resolved for years and years. So that's something which is impacting the balance sheets of and the profitability of infrastructure companies, which needs to get resolved. And, then you have, of course, faster clearances, etc. So these issues, I think the government, maybe partly through budget, partly outside the budget, needs to really see that they get resolved. And if they get resolved, you'll automatically find that, some of the stranded projects start to, take off, and correspondingly bank NPAs start to reduce. Now that is something, and that is how more bank finance will get released for the infrastructure sector. Today you've come to a situation where in many of the sectors, banks do not either want to lend to infrastructure sector, or they don't have the capacity now to lend because, they've reached their full limits. So you need to release limits from the banking sector. Of course, now coming to financing, you obviously need to have more innovative methods of financing. So the bond market, obviously now, I've been in the, not infrastructure, but in the financial sector for 30 years or 35. And the first day I came, I heard about this bond market development. India doesn't have a bond market. India doesn't have a bond market. That was 35 years ago in my previous life, it seems. And nothing much has happened. Only of late we are seeing, in the last maybe year or two, some developments on bond market, and now projects have started going out from banking finance because they don't get banking finance. So by perforce, they are going out, and the bond market is beginning to develop. But a lot of things still need to be done for the bond market to develop and make it as vibrant and active as it is internationally. And that will be a big, big plus so the government needs to, find out ways and force this bond market to develop. Then you have the municipal bond market is, for example, another thing for municipalities, for projects which are in the local city domains, etc. The municipal bond market is virtually not there as far as this country is concerned. Then I think the one big issue is how to attract foreign investors to infrastructure. And here when I say, I'm not talking of debt. Debt is still okay. You can get it. Now you also have the masala bonds, for example, which are coming up. So, you can get, debt is a problem, but not that much of a problem. Equity for infrastructure is a real issue. You just don't get it. And if you surprisingly look at it, we've been talking, we have so much of, FDI coming into the country. We have so much of FII money coming into the country. But if you analyze how much of it has come directly into infrastructure, very little. Roads, there's hardly any
Why do you
foreign.
think, why do you think that's happening? What could be the reason that equity is not coming into infrastructure projects?
Well, obviously, the viability and profitability of these projects needs to be demonstrated upfront to the, foreign investors. Because they are investing primarily on the basis that they will get a fair return or a reasonable return or whatever return they're looking for. And now over the last 3-4 years, you actually find that, even if you look at listed stock market, listed companies in the infrastructure, most of them their stock prices are really down 70, 80, 90% from where they were. So obviously, there is something wrong in terms of the viability, in demonstrating the viability of these projects. And, the standard projects, et cetera, are something which is actually forcing away the foreign investor from coming into equity. So they have to be made attractive. Now, tax breaks is only one part of it. I don't believe tax breaks is something which by itself, brings investor. As a, let's say, if I am an individual investor, and now I'm not talking of infrastructure, any project, if I were just getting a tax break, but if I don't see a good return, I don't think I'm going to invest in it. The first thing is, I have to be able to be reasonably confident that I'll get a reasonable return from that. And tax break is only a secondary part of it. Now, the good part here is, as far as infrastructure is concerned, is that one very innovative, what you can call semi-equity, semi-debt, I don't know, means of financing, which the government over the last 2 years, and 2-3 budgets actually, through tax breaks and through other things, has brought and is now, I think, ready for cooking and ready for rolling out, is the InvITs. So I think in the next 3 or 4 months, 5 months, you'll see at least 7 or 8 or 10 InvITs coming to the market. And this is a product which partially addresses this equity issue, because it's going to provide, hopefully, return or a constant return to investors with a little bit of appreciation as you go along, where cash flows and returns are visible to investors, over a fairly long period of time. And that is what investors are really looking for, particularly, as I said, foreign investors. So I'm very hopeful that this is a product which will really play a very large role in attracting equity, in attracting investors to infrastructure, and not only domestic but foreign investors. I think this can be a very good product for the foreign market. And it will also help in releasing bank loans, because you can replace your bank loans through by raising money in InvITs, and therefore it enables banks to finance new projects as you go along. So I think these are the type of things which need to be done. I don't know how many of them can be addressed in a single budget. A lot of them can be addressed outside the budget. But these are the real issues facing the industry today and need to be solved.
Thanks, Mr. Kapoor. You have raised an important point on financing. Mr. Nair, you're an expert in PPPs. Given what Mr. Kapoor pointed out on inability to attract equity financing into infrastructure projects, what has been your experience with PPPs? Is that a solution to kind of bridge this problem, or?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. You can hear me? Yeah. So, I am very optimistic in this particular year, much more than other years, simply because this cartoon called demonetization presents an opportunity along with the type of government which is being formed. We have a person who has implemented a certain model in Gujarat, and he has always, looked at a basic model in which the infrastructure is provided first and government has no business in business, which means if you have this surplus, I'm told as much as 12K crore, which basically translates to about $180 billion is coming in. And a lot of the points which my friends have addressed, This is the moment, because you will not get another moment like this where a sudden bulk of money comes into the banks. Now you can waste it on all sorts of populist schemes, or I'm assuming around 30% of it will go in various penalties once the stuff becomes white and then they assess. And let's say about 8K crore or 120, 130 billion dollars comes in. The point which Mr. Kapoor made about the equity part having to come into the projects. You know, the hybrid annuity model which has been made for the roads, which reduces the requirement of the private developer to put such a sizable amount in equity. I'm hoping the government would come out. There's one way to use that money and just have what we call EPC contracts, which is just using that money for straightforward creation. Or if they use agencies, say like IDFC or IDEC or ILFS or SBI Capital and many range of private bodies, to come out with a range of hybrid models in different sectors. Then if you look at it, you can get 5 times the amount of projects. And it's my passionate hope that this money comes in equity form. You know, various types of sectors require different kinds of, what you say, inputs of equity. Some sectors like tourism, for example, tourism infrastructure, a tourism SEZ, can get a payback period of say 6 to 8 years. Other things like a road will take slightly longer. Other things like a port will take slightly longer. Therefore, the type of models which have to be created for these, if you create models, what you will do is get the best value out of each government rupee. So I think in my area, since my colleagues have spoken about the macro financing aspect, my hope is that in this very exceptional year where a huge amount of money has come into the banks and a huge amount of money has been gathered in penalties, therefore the government will be in a relatively healthier position. They should not just try to put that in infrastructure, but try to leverage that using even NGOs in the semi-urban areas. We have never thought of NGOs as being parties who can work on PPP, because whenever this word is used, it talks about mega stuff. This can be, my experience has been that it is the small and medium projects. More than 1,000 projects have come up, and you'd be surprised to know the ADB has rated India in the developed category for PPP, far ahead of China. China's infrastructure is basically more of a government nature. Our regulations are far better and far more conducive. The only problem, I think, is number one, expertise, and number two, the infusion of equity, which I keep saying, and the viability. You can't make it perfect because this is a public asset, and there's a limitation on how much you can charge the public, especially in a country like ours. You have to have companies making skilled models. For example, in tourism, in Karnataka, there was an effort of KTDC to give some of their properties. If you give it away or sell it away, there'll be an uproar. Public property has been given. But why not give it for 20 years? The model which our company did was renovate, operate, maintain, and transfer, ROMT. It's not just BOT. There are hundreds of models you can put, BLMT. You can have just operation and maintenance depending upon the issues. You get some aspect of the project improved. The cash flows coming from the project should take care of the project in due course of time, which means that you need relatively less government money going into that, which means that this kitty can be utilized for a much wider range of projects. So my answer to your question is that if this surplus can be used in a very intelligent manner to get a large number of self-sustaining small and medium projects and developers who include NGOs. What I mean is you take primary healthcare centers. You have that also on PPP. PPP simply means public-private, where the government and the private sector is involved. Not mega stuff, I again repeat. That is the problem. We always want to look at these billions of dollars stuff. You take in a small town primary healthcare unit and an NGO running it, or NGO running a range of stuff. You put a certain amount of money, limited amount, let the other person put the money, and then let them manage it, which they can do if it is, and they will manage it far better than the government can manage it because they are expert in that.
I'm glad you brought this point about the money that has come into the banks post demonetization, because there's been a large expectation that the Prime Minister might use the money for income transfer scheme, as a handout to below poverty line families.
This Prime Minister, looking at the way he's worked in Gujarat, infrastructure is definitely a key thing. As far as this regime is concerned and the officials with them, many of them have come from Gujarat, and the focus is very infrastructure centric. As I said, the model is make the infrastructure, government has no business in business. If you make it attractive enough, then people will come in anyway. If you make it attractive enough, that's the point Mr. Kapoor made also. To make it viable, you need all sorts of engineering, especially the equity.
Talking of the money in the banks, I have only one issue here. How much of it is long-term savings? There could be a mismatch here. You're talking of infrastructure financing, which is typically 20 to 30 years time horizon. Whereas the money that has come into the banks now, I'm not even talking about the penalties that the government
Not
will
all
which will become the government's
infrastructure
money.
is 20 to 30 years. Actually, that's why when we talk of this mega stuff, the social infrastructure, health, education, and tourism infrastructure, I'm talking of the infra, not the services. The payback is much quicker. And therefore, you would possibly need financing definitely over 7 years, but possibly 10 or 12 years. Some of the infra could, if you have a 30-year time period, if it is an attractive project and comes up reasonably well, you'll have takeout finance. That is, somebody else would just take over that loan. So you could have 2 or 3 rollovers for 30 years. It's not realistic to have one. The thing is, the point I'm trying to make is focus on make models which make it viable for each of the segments.
So you expect schemes in the budget to
Yes,
utilize
absolutely.
this?
The scheme, for example, I'll tell you, the port is a very long-term stuff. Why don't you have a lot of projects on PPP in port backup infrastructure? Sir, you are from JNPT. We can, a lot of our cost goes when the thing lands, the goods land on the port, and it has to travel a long distance to the factory as raw material. Or the factory exports the goods and it gets stuck up. If you have most of port-centric development, and good, I'm very happy about Indian Port Rail Corporation because, the combination of the port and the rail takes the congestion off the road and the landed costs tend to come down enormously. So then this becomes attractive. And it may cross-subsidize the activities of the port because the port will charge some cess or tariff. What I'm trying to say is make those models. For example, if a city or a port industrial cluster is producing crores of rupees, tax something and cross-subsidize, and therefore the person investing in the port will get a better return. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's interesting. That comes straight to Mr. Sitaris's subject. Ports, there's been a lot of activity on the ports front in this government, and the Sagarmala project, for instance, and the requirement of funds, again, there is a major constraint. And we also have the dedicated freight corridor, which sinks into the JNPT and other Bombay port and the Gujarat ports. Now, what do you expect on the ports front that the government should do to push infrastructure more there?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So, getting straight into the point, number one, actually, this port is actually now the government of India has taken quite an effective initiative with the support of Sagarmala project, actually. So, the dedicated Ministry of Shipping has been seeing to it, actually, the entire Sagarmala can be connected with, the 12 major ports, plus 12, could you hear me? Yeah. 12 major ports and, other about 39, 40 smaller ports who can be connected with each other. So the overall economic activity can really bloom into its capacity, actually. But that is having said that, actually, this will take a long time, actually, because the port has got its own structure, regulation, has got 1999, one act has been passed, port guideline, then followed by 2014, then the 2015 guideline has been followed. But every way it has been only, there got certain restriction has been laid down there, particularly we subject to which we concern to us also to great extent, the leasing of the land, in fact. In other places outside the estate, if you talk about it, basically you talk about 99 years of the leasing of the land. You go to MIDC outside the investment centers. The investors are actually very, very concerned about it. Investors basically what we're looking at is what should not only the existing infrastructure what we're providing, what are the 99 years, the 90 years period that we're going to along with the infrastructure. Particularly if you go over the port areas, if you want to make an investment, as Mr. Padma rightly hit the bullseye, that you can get the land only for the 30 years of period actually, not beyond. As per 2014 and 15, the guideline which is set into. That is where the investor has got a concern, though it is basically a supplies market actually. It's not a buyer's market. The supply is really the dominating there. That leverage has been not yet been given there. So that is where the third area is that we are taking it forward with the respective, of course, the competent authorities, where it could be increased from 30 years to 60 years, if possibly 90 years. That is where came into the place, all this port also started looking at it, self-revenue generating system, in fact. Despite they have started SEZ, which again, I am the CEO of that particular company. Particularly with South Cochin has started, then the JNPT also started their SEZ as such. They have about 700 acres of land where the self-industrialization can take place, which can revenue generate and can be complementary and supplementary to both the port and the interland activities. That to a great extent also has been giving a boost to it, in fact. But the point is that SEZ Act, 2005, the Act came into forefront, then 2006, the rule came into. But really, in terms of the implementation part, again, which there is a concern overall, has really got the effect to it, overall effect to the entire operation in terms of benefit, in terms of management altogether. Their concern is what we have been done actually 2005 and 2012, what we imposed MAT. Because the real attraction for the SEZ Act was to get the incentives. Incentive in terms of income tax, that way there, but of course, besides all this. So you can see to it, when we talk about, basically the government has got three objectives to implement. One is in terms of the investment, employment, and the profitability. And all these three things have been component, has been emanated from this particular SEZ. You can see to in terms of statistics, we see that 16 lakhs of people have been directly employed into the SEZ. About 3.67 lakh crores has been already invested into it. And 4.67 crores already has been taken place. And of course, the total 30% of the entire export of the overall countries comes from the SEZ. Despite of this fact has been given, and all these SEZs are a bad perception across the globe. The SEZ basically only a industry. No, it's a basically infrastructure development. If any SEZ has to develop, it has to develop infrastructure. The road, the power, the water, the sewage, the telecommunication, all has to come in. Because any investor wants to come, either he sees that visibility is there, the development is there, or the commitment needs to be given to particularly to that particular investor that we will provide within a stipulated time. Then only brings in the money. So that is the importance and significance of particular SEZ. After particular imposition, again the wrong decision which has been, I won't say wrong, it's basically the tough decision has been taken by the government in terms of revenue generation or the loss of revenue, that imposition of the MAT. Then followed by it, unfortunately what happened, which needs to be concerned for all the SEZs, from 2017 onwards, March 31st, again what they're trying to impose another one act that is called withdrawal of the benefit, withdrawal of the benefit to the developer. That means income tax benefit has gone. Now all the benefits the developer is going to go from this day. So that is again the investors' concerns are there actually. So these two areas, particularly MAT, we have been actually we have been taking forward with the ministry. It is not done, but at least this should be extended to the developer. At least they can have a further more years. Because today, if you see 204 operational SEZs are there in India today, and 500 about odd SEZ already got formal approach. That means 50% only operational, because the balance 50% has not come only because of these constraints. So there where the government has to take an address, which we pursue being there. If they extend this developers benefit for further a couple of years, then I think further investment is expected to be in the SEZ sector. Having said that, so these are the active where, of course, there are a lot of other issues which is also pertaining there in terms of the infrastructure. But still, we are very confident that it will be taken care. The infrastructure development has taken place within the premises. All these things, you can say about more than 1 lakh acres of land has been developed out there, well developed, with all the infrastructure out there. So that development has been taking place in that particular places, and it is happening there in the most of these very close to port areas. So the interconnectivity also been developing as such. So we are hopeful that maybe with this particular budget addresses these issues, TAM, what we call it, tariff of the startup, and of course this SEZ Act. This.
Connectivity to ports is also a major issue, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to talk about ports and land around that and infrastructure built, but if you take a lot of the major ports in the country, connectivity is a major, especially in a port like Chennai or JNPT, the connectivity issues have to be improved. But what do you think the government should do there? Should it?
No, it's actually, as far as the connectivity concerned, the government is already, if you see JNPT from, they have got about 4 lanes, 6 lanes, they're also going to extend up to 8 lanes. So that connectivity they are increasing. Connectivity from the different interland till the port. Within the port, from the radius of, if you take it from JNPT, New Bombay to Bombay, the connectivity is quite well. Even within the area which has been from Uran, it's about 20 kilometers from the port, they are developing very well. Enough fund has been pumped into it, but only the process, whatever in the process, when you go to like EPC contract we have been talking about, then when the tendering process comes into actually, the entire process takes a long time. I remember one of the incidents which I should tell it, like Pune-Bombay highway, which was built in a record time of, I think, less than 30 months, when the originally it was given for 48 months.
But that's the only showpiece that we can talk
Exactly.
about.
I'm trying to tell you that is, and one man can do it. In fact, the decision process go fast. But here, all the plan is in place. Only the implementation part which has been taking time to do it actually. The entire process is consuming it in fact. So that is where the decision has been lacking. There, the tough decision, which is the dynamics of the time, has to be taken care. Then I think maybe in over a period of a year or two, all these connectivities, plan in place, structure in place, only the process is not in place. The implementation has to take the faster. If that takes place, I think things to the connectivity road, to particularly the major ports. Of course, another port, smaller port, we cannot imagine for another 10, 15 years down the line. But at least for within a couple of years, this major port connectivity can be increased. But that again, lot depends on the level of investment which is coming into actually. The investment, what is happening today is not exactly, all this lot of, we have really has marketed India globally quite well in fact. You go out the globe, but when it comes to reality in the putting the color of the money, that the real issue comes into in fact. Everybody visiting today, if you go down to DIPP website, you can see the 16 lakh crores investment. Where it's come? Either it has come from Singapore or from some other land. But reality, China is 2%, 3%, Singapore. So reality in the color of the thing is not really happening. In fact. But really I was then vibrant Gujarat only a couple of days before. We got almost 60 countries I visited. There are about 18 countries have their own pavilion. When I spoke to them, the consulate and all are there actually. They've been so gala about it, all the entire world is coming to be conferencing there. But when we come please, why don't you invest in my project and see that? They go, okay, we'll wait for some more time. Let's give us time. See the thing. So they are into time, they're not in a mood to put money, but they're in a mood to see, because other part of the world, there are a lot of, things are making India the possible center to make the investment. But I think we are not still ripe enough to catch that opportunity which is gathering outside India. So because of only these things, down the line, the implementation, which needs to be expedited.
Interesting. Pavan, I'll come back to you on a point you mentioned. You said we need 43 lakh crores, 43 trillion rupees basically for infrastructure, and you mentioned that about 30%, 11 to 12 lakh crores or 11 to 12 trillion rupees has to come from the bond market. Now, are our bond markets so well developed? Do they have the depths right now to handle that kind of money? And even if there are issuers willing, are there investors willing to take up that kind of issuances?
Yeah, I think our bond markets clearly have a long way to go. I think they are nowhere close to either the equity market development that we have seen in the country, or if you look at what bond markets contribute to other economies which are of a similar place. So there is clearly a long way to go, and we hope that a lot of steps that have been taken move us in that direction. But I think we are getting confidence, more and more confidence and optimistic around development of bond market in recent times. And if you look at 15-16, we did a study, how much of corporate sector's funding actually comes from bond markets, and how has it changed over the past 5 to 7 years. And what we noticed is incremental funding from the bond market in 15-16 was, and I'm including here the commercial paper and the bond market together, because that's the non-banking funding, disintermediated funding that is happening. we see close to 1/3 of the incremental funding requirements being met from bond market. And that picture is very different from the past 5 years, where we actually saw only about 17-18% of the incremental funding in any year coming in from the bond market. So clearly the needle has already moved reasonably materially in the past 4 or 5 years. And why we believe a lot of that is durable, sustainable. In the past 10 years, we have seen bond market issuances grow at 20% compounded annually. And the critical piece of enduring macroeconomic stability, I think we believe is going to lead to this continuing sustaining. Another important element again, which is a critical part of what gives confidence to bond market investors is the bankruptcy law. I think implementation of the bankruptcy law clearly makes bond markets far more attractive. Bond market investors look for ability to resolve bankruptcy or get their money in a timely manner. And a bankruptcy law clearly is a very good enabling step. Our experience or whatever we have seen as experience of other markets, similarly placed economies, implementation of an effective bankruptcy law, within 3 to 5 years, we see the bond market penetration increase by up to 5 to 7% in any economy.
Okay.
So I think clearly coupled with the macroeconomic environment and low interest, durable interest rates and bankruptcy law coming in place, I think next few years certainly will be attractive. And I think from an investor perspective, what they are looking for is ability to get projects in which, because these are long term in nature, confidence that I will get my money back over a long period of time, and which is where a lot of new innovation is required for continuing to develop the bond market that we are seeing. And I think a few areas where new kind of issuances or issuers will add in. I think a municipal bond market, we've not seen too much success. But again, we are doing, along with a lot of governments today, we are seeing and assessing municipal corporations across various states. So of the 4 or 5 states that we have recently seen, we are seeing about 12 municipal corporations, 10 to 12 municipal corporations that are getting into ratings of single A or above. And nearly half of them can actually be a AA category municipal corporations. Now, if these municipal corporations are nudged to move to the bond market, I think they can create an additional avenue for investors as well as for funding of smart cities. That is an important critical aspect that we continue to see. And you can weave in that smart city implementation the PPP elements that Mr. Nair talked about on how do you make it more effective along with the PPP so that the amount of money municipal corporations are required to invest can also come down. So I think there are enough ways in which innovation can be weaved into the bond market to make it to meet the requirements that the sector today has.
That's very interesting. I think one aspect also is that will probably give a leg up to bond markets is the inability of our banks to lend, do a proper risk assessment and take a long-term view on infrastructure projects and lend. And going by the growth in credit offtake in the last few months, I think bond markets are probably...
I just want to add a little point, if I may. See, the two things are linked together. We are, in a sense, commenting on two. One is the cash coming in some certain form. The other thing is, if the project is productive and the people handling it are credible and the support systems are there, then you will find banks keen to lend. I mean, I had attended one seminar in Karnataka, a government seminar, where a host of developers in renewable energy were yelling that the banks are not giving them money. And what actually turned out to be is the banks don't have confidence in people who are, say, sugar manufacturers trying to set up a plant. What Mr. Kapoor said about the tax, you set up something to save tax or you set up something to run a project. But when Sun Edison and all these people come in, everybody's running. So if similarly, that doesn't mean you need Sun Edisons and international investors. The point you made about municipalities, don't I think get the PPP down into from the NGO to the municipality to the self-help bodies for various kinds of activities, and have small units, independent corporations, trusts, whatever you have, and let the money go directly to them. And then you will find banks may be ready to lend 25 lakhs to an NGO for a hospital or an educational institution, and a model could be made, and the municipality will subsidize some part. And this was the question I said, this government believes in everybody paying something.
But this government and NGOs, are you really serious about that?
Yes, absolutely. This government is not sitting there in Delhi and just directly managing. There's a chain. So what I say is, it'll encourage, say, agencies like all of us to make models, sector-specific models, port certain type, port backup certain type, port city and manufacturing certain type, port rail certain type. Like that, you have to make things which match. The money will flow if it matches, and this particular body will then subcontract various aspects. What it does now is it is a huge monolith where there are various bureaucratic departments who do this and this and that, instead of which it will give it to more dynamic. For example, if I may say so, port logistics in Gujarat, they experimented with privately contracting in Kandla, and I think JNPT also does that. You have private logistics contractors. It is overseen by the port, that is important. But let this private logistics contractor grow. That contractor will take money from the banks. The banks will be happy to lend such a person because there's just as an example, if I take JNPT, the money is going to come from a AAA body. So this contractor can get money from the banks. Why do we always need to give it to some big body? Let there be small loans given by various banks which are flooded with cash right now. One bank manager was telling me he has got 5 times the cash he ever had in this moment. And this is the moment to develop infrastructure, because if you use this cash on populist things, then I think we've lost.
Those are very valuable suggestions for Mr. Jaitley.
I'll add to here actually what Ms. Padmanabhan there actually. You see, as far as the two parts, one part as far if you talk about the port and the port related activities, in the non-port other areas you there. If you, for example, the port, any decision properly somebody come for as equity stakeholder want to share, want to logistic part of it, the process become long actually, because sitting here, the decision process doesn't happen here. It has got a board, it goes to the ministry, it goes to the chain. So by the time it comes back, it's but the good thing is that a lot of things are happening, where the process has been fastened. That is how they know from third terminal to be gone into fourth terminal now. We have maybe the fourth terminal also. We are extending 10 million to 12 million of TU to be done within 2020. Having said that, if you go to other side, see the level of confidence building is extremely weak. For example, because I have been part of the Tatas there, in fact, in one of the biggest project in SEZ in Odisha. No, it has been almost 14 years. Till today, they are not able to convince the local people to get it. Despite the fact being Tata, they are known for the corporate social responsibilities, giving everything, creating a separate infrastructure for them, setting them, giving them the food, shelter, and all these services also. Still, that is not, they are not able to really build up. Even after 40, still they are dwelling what exactly that. Because other side, the government also is part of the stakeholders. Government is not exactly willing to what you will do, not do it. Because they started with CRM, the CRM failed. They have to switch it over to Jamshedpur, to remove Ramanathan. Then they now struggling with, which I was part of a struggler actually, to get this SES to be operational. Now, whatever they want to start with the government, so no, they have given it one side. On the other side, in the back side, they do no, it's again, you have to prove that, you are taking care of the people of the local, give them further. Because again, the Land Act, which has been changed recently, it is saying almost 5 to 6 times more what they have actually paid actually. So those who got the benefit are coming by telling, no, give me the renewed benefit actually. So these are the things, anomalies between these people, that level of confidence not been happening. Having said that, but there are projects also like Magarpata, one of them. The most successful way they're able to, Amul, they're able to bring the entire, population together and make them happy out there. But they're rare, like Pune, you rightly pointed out actually. So they are rare, but exceptions are always the rule which can be followed. We are not following it. We are not following it. We are always work on isolation. Then where all the issue comes into actually, whether this, and we are not taking stakeholder at all confidence. That is unfortunate.
Means to add to that, for example, there are projects, what I read about, For example, the Andhra government, which is doing the new capital, I mean, they've been able to acquire huge amounts of land, some
That's through
30,000
land
acres,
pooling,
through land pooling in a very short period of time and without any dissonance from the local population. Similarly, from what I read, although I don't have first-hand experience, the Lucknow-Agra expressway, which has just got completed, I mean, huge amounts of land have been acquired without any local listing. So that's the point. I think I agree with that. You know, getting the local people.
I think we may just have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Is there anything someone wants to ask before we wind up? Yeah. The gentleman there. Can you give him a mic, please?
Fruits. The ideas and suggestions that have come, some were low-hanging fruits and some are really sustainable and hardcore things. The gentleman told about cash is converted into lendable resources, but capital adequacy is an important thing for the banks. Right now, with the kind of NPA that they are burdened with, I don't know how much they will be in a position to release in the form of resources for this. Second,
I'm finding it difficult.
I do not know, he told about this, very valid point, he told about this claim management. Only one company in the road project was successful enough to get the claim settled at the very fastest possible time, that has been reported recently, and others are not as fortunate. One more thing that comes to my mind is the dispute resolution. Because the number of agencies, stakeholders are there, the dispute resolution, how far it is functioning, I would like to be, some light can be thrown on that, please. Thank you.
Maybe a quick reply, Pavan.
I can talk about the capital adequacy, maybe the claims management.
Yeah, so the claims and dispute, these are two important areas, I agree with you, which I mentioned also, which are a cause of lot of hardships for infrastructure projects and infrastructure companies. So if you see, I think there are about claims running into lakhs of crores of rupees in the road sector itself, which are due either from the NHAI or from other concessionaires, state concessionaires, etc., which have not been resolved, and you go into arbitration, then that keeps on going on for 3 years, 5 years, then you go, and then the concessionaire authority was not accepting the arbitration decision, and then they would go to court, and then it goes to Supreme Court, as you know our system. So that's now with the change in the Arbitration Act, and also the government having clarified that it is going to apply even to earlier projects. So first, when they amended it, it was only for projects from that date onwards or from claims from that date onwards. Now it's been indicated that it's also applicable to earlier. So I think over the next 12 to 18 months, we expect a lot of advancement to happen in this claim resolution, claim management resolution. Dispute resolution also is part of, this claims is part of the dispute resolution mechanism, which is broader, because there you have issues of land and so on and so forth. So there, I think still a lot of work needs to be done to make that much more effective. But it's a very, very important point.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor, and thank you, Mr. Sittarasu and Mr. Nair and Pavan. It's been a very enlightening discussion, and there's a bag full of ideas for Mr. Jaitley to carry to Parliament. Probably he'll be carrying a bigger briefcase this time. So thank you for this discussion, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you would please just stay on stage. We have mementos for you that Raghuveer will hand out. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Sittarasu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Mr. Vibhav Kapoor. Mr. Padmanabhan Nair.
ball rolling very well.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Picture, joint picture.
We'll take a short break now and reconvene at 11:45 for the next session on the digital economy.
Group picture.
Yes, sure. We do it with this?
Yeah, we should.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's what I Wonderful. Intensive finance aspect. Absolutely. I shouldn't convince you.
We are
Okay. Absolutely right.
all the ideas in infrastructure which earlier they were doing.
Okay.
So our domestic people in the industry,
Please, please.
I look after international business.
Okay. Okay, great.
May I have one more card? I
Sure.
put it to my domestic person
I will take
because he has a lot to discuss.
So if you think of it, in terms of in SEZ, what are the can be done? I think we can definitely work it
Lots
out.
we are doing in South. We were assigned to do all the work of the South. Now we have
Okay.
been including Maharashtra, Gujarat, Punjab.
Great, great, great. In the south also. No, you let's send up us. I am more concerned about the SEZ because what
The point I made, without SEZ and without all the surrounding things, nobody will invest.
absolutely. We have to do that actually, which we are doing.
No, we can concretely address.
I'd request you to please return to your seats soon. We're starting shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats soon. Please take your seat soon. I'd like to welcome the next panelists on stage. So please return to your seats. Welcome back. Our next panel discussion is on digital India and the particular challenges that this sector faces. To moderate this discussion, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Thomas K. Thomas, Mumbai Bureau Chief, The Hindu Business Line. Our first panelist for this session is Mr. Naveen Surya, co-founder and managing director, It's Cash. Mr. Surya enabled It's Cash's growth from being a single prepaid product company to being one of India's leading payment solution providers. He sees fintech companies like It's Cash driving the next chapter of financial inclusion for the country's underbanked and unbanked. Thank you for being here, sir. We have Mr. Mahesh Murthy, co-founder and managing director, Seed Fund, and an e-commerce expert. Mr. Murthy has over 26 years of experience in marketing and communications, gaining notoriety for his creative spots for HP, The Economist, Pepsi, and MTV. In his role as a mentor to the startup sector, he invests and guides emerging companies. Thank you, Mr. Murthy. We next have Mr. Sanjay Mehta, serial entrepreneur and member of Indian Angel Fund. Mr. Mehta's portfolio includes new age companies such as Zipper, Box8, and Oyo Rooms. He was ranked as the 8th most prominent angel investor in India by Forbes in 2016. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. And we have Mr. Manoj Gupta, co-founder of Craftsvilla, a leading ethnic apparel and lifestyle products company. Mr. Gupta founded Craftsvilla in 2011 with his wife Monica to give impoverished local artisans access to a wider market. Before starting the company, Mr. Gupta was principal at Nexus Venture Partners, where he helped early stage companies and passionate entrepreneurs build scalable businesses. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for being here. Over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, Tanya. Welcome again after an interesting first morning panel discussion. I can promise you that this panel discussion is going to be much more interesting and much more knowledgeable, because the kind of panelists that we have today are probably the kind of, these are the people who are making big decisions, investments, and forming the opinion as far as the digital space is concerned. About 2 years back, we all know what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had announced his vision for Digital India. And post that, a slew of initiatives was announced, including tax breaks for startups. There was a startup fund which was set up. So over the last 2 years, there have been a lot of focus in and outside of the budget to see how India can leapfrog and leverage this new economy or the digital economy, which we all know as. But 2 years later, in 2017, beginning of 2017, what is really the reality of this space? What are the challenges? Has all the visions spelled out by the Prime Minister, how has that been implemented on ground? To discuss all of these issues, we have our panelists here today who have been introduced to you already. I'm going to ask Mahesh to start off this discussion. Mahesh, from your experience, what you've seen in the last 2 years, do you think on ground this whole vision of Digital India as was envisioned by the Prime Minister, and what is the reality actually that is happening today?
So I think we all bought into the vision, Thomas. We all bought into the fact that we want a digital India, and that's going to help us fraud.
I think voice is not.
Am I audible? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I think we all bought into the idea that we will have an India where everybody is digitally connected.
Just one sec, sorry.
I just hold it here, sorry. I think what's happened is, and a lot of it has been apparent post-demonetization, that yes, we have a billion mobile phones in the country, and we have 700 million users. There's still only like 300 million of them or so on data, which basically means there's about 60% of the country that doesn't have data, even though they have the means and the ability to have data. A simple thing that they could have done is said, you know what we are mandating is every single telco has to offer, let's say whatever, 1 gig a month free or 100 MB a month free, whatever, which would have at least got everybody pushed onto smartphones so they can participate out here. So we're still talking about the fact that we now have a digital India, but we don't have a digital Bharat, right? I think that's the first part. The second point is, when it comes to all the schemes, yeah, we were excited when, Startup India was announced a year ago, but then you saw that it was just another scheme. Startup India, Stand Up India, Get Up India, Get Down India, Sleep Now India, Wake Up India, go to bed India, Bathe Now India, right? At this point, finally, you know that they're announcing schemes, and it's not really something they care about in terms of implementing any depth.
Right.
Like the funds, startup funds has barely been deployed. The big thing, to be able to take care of Startup India, which is a 3-year tax holiday, which is kind of nonsensical. All of 8 companies in India have qualified for it. 8, that's it. And we have something like 10, 15,000 startups in India.
Right.
So I think in some cases, the accelerator and the brake, while maybe there's some people who want to press the accelerator, maybe that's Mr. Modi and his coterie, there's a break of the bureaucracy saying, yeah, but before that, get a certificate from your principal, get your 8th class Sanskrit examination paper, mark sheet and submit it. This ridiculous kind of push and pull that happens is kind of undermining us. So I again think from a 35,000 foot level, yeah, it's been nice sounding stuff. But on ground, there's an extraordinary amount of loss in translation that has happened.
Right.
And you've seen that happen on ground. So, yeah, is it better than what we had earlier? Yes. Earlier we didn't even have, visions and blah, blah from 35,000 foot level. But in these cases, we now have dash promises. So is it better than before? Yes. But is it there? No.
Right. So you mentioned about the startup fund, just having about 8 applicants actually qualifying for it. Another statistics is about this, allowing startups to have tax breaks for a 3-year period. And as of December, I think they have given the tax break to about 5 companies, or about 1,500 companies that actually applied, and just 5 qualified for it. Sanjay, from a purely from an investor point of view, as an angel investor. How do you see this space has moved in the last 2 years?
So the way I would tell, aspiring entrepreneurs, because I'm an angel investor, is don't go by what government says or saying that, government has started so many initiatives, so your life would be very smooth. If you're getting into the entrepreneurship game, then please, it's all tough and, there's no support as such from government. While it's great on the paper, the actual it's trickling down. Maybe possibly 2020 we might see some outcome when the next wave of election comes across. But as of now, the status quo virtually remains the same, what it was before the new government came in and what it is now. There is hardly any change for startups. And from an investor perspective, also we are facing challenges in terms of taxes. So for example, there is a section 56(2)(7)(b) which allows income tax to levy tax on the premium as a other source of income for startups. So as an investor, if I invest into any startup with high premium, because that's what would require across to maintain the equity, it would be considered as an income and income tax would be allowed to charge tax on it. Now that's not happening, right? So within my portfolio, I've got almost like half a dozen companies where these challenges have cropped up. So it has been a continuous journey rather than making smooth, it is becoming difficult.
Naveen, we see fintech segment as one of the beneficiaries of everything that's been happening in the last 2 years. Would you agree, or do you also say there is much to be desired from what the intent is and what is actually happening on ground in the fintech space?
So I think, yes, I would agree that fintech has benefited to some extent. But is it to the level that was desired? Absolutely no. So I think when the PM said about digital India, of course, Bharat was missing in any case there. The second part was very soon they realized, which we as the industry player knew, that a digital India without digital money cannot be made a reality. And that's what over a period of time they realized, and that's why you see a renewed focus of having money which moves in the economy also to be digital. Well, I was a commerce graduate, and back then in economics we had studied that your economy is like the body and money is like a blood flow. So if your country or economy is going to be digital, but if your money is going to be physical, you're going to have a heart attack. Right. That's what has been happening in this situation. So I think government has started realizing it, and this whole fintech space which is emerging, the fact that they will have to depend on, one, the regulatory environment, second, this digital money. So they're trying to build their entire concepts, entire business model, where money has to seamlessly flow in digital environment, and all the policies has to be aligned in different, let's say, be it insurance, be it payments, be it your mutual fund, they have to be aligned and converged, which is not the situation today. So if you see, it's a fractures approach which will create a non-sustainable business model, which was already a problem in our country. So I think after a few years, the government has realized we need to create a digital money. There is a renewed focus on it. That said, there are very fundamental issues. The intent seems to be good like always, but the execution always remains poor in our country.
Right.
Partly, so you see very simple example. You will say digital payments all exempt from service tax. Final fine print come, it will talk about bank acquired transaction. Now, it's completely a chaotic situation that for what is it digital only for one particular type of entity, then it is digital, but everything else happens. So the execution is very poor on those. The intent is completely missed out. The issue is about interoperability. I think we all know, globally, no payment system can evolve without being interoperable. So you see a situation where every consumer who is first time trying to come into a fold of a payment transaction and then being part of a digital payments transactions is actually needing to keep different accounts. You have some money in one account, you have some money in another account. Why? Simply because you're not sure which particular account works where. While if you have a debit or credit card, which unfortunately is in a very handful of guys, or very few guys still, about 10 to 20% population. Credit card anyway is 1.5%. So imagine if you had a credit card and you had to go to a restaurant and check whether my card will get accepted here or not. So it's simply not scalable. So these are very basic things which has been continuously being talked about. There has been a recent...
So in fact, while credit card Naveen was mentioning, for a SaaS companies, we can't use credit card for a subscription because you can't have a recurring payment. I mean, simple stuff, right? So today, Indians as companies can't compete against the rest of the guys because world over, subscription is you charge monthly. Today, if I have got a Google subscription, they bill me monthly without OTP.
Right.
So it makes easier to do business outside than it's easier to do business in India.
No, I'll even back up. If it not just is subscriptions an issue, we have an issue among the simple fact that according to Indian law, anything digital is not a product, it's only a service.
Yeah.
Right? So if I buy a movie, and if I buy a movie on a CD or a DVD form, it's a good. But if I buy that movie on Amazon Prime, it's a service. Right? So suddenly, we are now, everything is called a service. I have no idea. So this is maybe done conveniently to get everything to TaxNet, but we don't have a definition of a digital good in India.
Yeah.
It is a physical good, and if it's not physical, it's a service.
Right. And to add to this, Thomas, what Mahesh mentioned, if it is a service, all the corporates cut TDS. Now, as a startup, a lot of my portfolio companies, their investment is stuck up because they are in losses. They have to recover that tax as a refund for government. So almost 12% of their turnover is stuck with government at all times in TDS.
Manoj, I just want to bring in you here at this point in time. As an entrepreneur, as an e-commerce company, have you benefited in any way in the last 2 years or any of these schemes, or have you seen any of your peers or other people who have just got into the startup space get any sort of benefit out of what's been happening as far as the policy is concerned?
Well, for Craftzilla itself, just to step back, right? When I started Craftzilla, my biggest challenge was not starting. It was government, right? A lot of compliances. I was running here, there. Suddenly you realize that you're actually not doing business. You're doing a lot of compliance work. And I've started a company in US, and this is stark contrast. You will see how government there is so helpful to you when you're starting up, right? You don't have to worry about a lot of your, you don't even worry about compliances to the extent we worry about here, right? We, for example, recently got funded, and the movement of money, for example, in getting money into Singapore is so easy. While the movement of money into India, you have, there's so much paperwork happens, right? I think if you look from a startup lens, right, the startup needs ease of start. They need ease of compliance. They need ease of exit, right? Mergers and acquisitions, or getting acquired, or getting listed, right? And they need, in some ways, in my view, a differential policy. I think startups should be treated from a policy point of view differently compared to how established businesses should be treated. Simple thing like FDI in e-commerce, right? When I was starting up, the FDI in e-commerce was so on top of my mind that I would spend so much time just worrying about it, right? If there was a differential policy that, okay, for FDI in e-commerce, for startups, it doesn't matter, for a certain scale, it doesn't matter, it would have been easier for me to play with different business models and not worry about too much about policies as such at that stage, right? A lot of other challenges as a startup. Ease of exits, right? I have acquired 3 companies in 2016. Just the acquisition thing in India is so complicated, and you have to worry about so much taxes and how do you get that to work? It's just the nightmare, right? So yeah, a lot of intent, good intent, a lot of things announced. Very little has happened. I think that's the statement and that's the bottom line.
Actually, I often even doubt if there is good intent or if there was simply an intent to make the news as propaganda, right? Because if you actually had good intent, you would make an effort to follow it through. But there is not an effort to follow it through, right? So there's a large fund, which is a government fund, which has been trying to fund one of my companies. They were given the mandate 2 years ago, saying you now have so much money to fund a VC fund. But they haven't been given the money for 2 years yet.
Wow.
Right? So imagine there's a fund of funds which has been talking to funds and has already given them allocations,
right?
But no money.
Money hasn't come through.
Money hasn't come through, right? And 2 years the guys are sitting, right? So I don't know if there's intent. I mean, Is that intent, or is that is it an intent to actually make the change, or is it an intent to make the news? Right? I don't know. I sometimes suspect it's just an intent to say, okay, what headlines can I get, what clickbait can I get, and how much can I, get my BJP troll army to like forward it and say, "Bhaiya, desh badal raha hai, ab ki baar, vagera, vagera." Right? I often wonder.
So trolls will probably start hitting you on the Twitter feed as we are speaking.
I'm used to it.
Yeah.
So I think one is the intent, second is the pace. So let's just go back to this two-factor authentication issue. This has been raised with all the Uber coming into the India, and there was a big hue and cry with servers being. And I think that time RBI did the right thing, that at least your consumer card data should be in the country. Somebody has to be accountable for it. But parallelly, there was a clear discussion that if a customer wants to, let's say, clearly say, I don't want the second factor, and I want a seamless experience, just like if I'm traveling in US, hailing a Uber taxi, it gets automatically debited from my card, but somehow it wasn't allowed. The good part, finally it has happened after 2 years, that the last couple of months back, RBI has released a notification which says that consumers will be given options by all the banks, and for which all the payment network companies, Visa, MasterCard, RuPay, are trying to put together a process in consultation with banks, where up to 2,000 rupee transaction in digital mode, which means not at the POS, but on your internet, on your mobile apps, they can choose not to use PIN. They can do a seamless
That's why,
checkout.
Naveen, this comes with so many rules and strings, right?
Absolutely.
2,000 A, 5,000. I mean, why, right?
Which brings me to the next sort of question, that we are here to discuss what can the government do from here on, right? So come February 1, if you were to sort of were addressing the finance minister, what would be, say, the 2 or 3 things, and all of you can just weigh in on this, and what could the government do for the Digital India scheme, which according to you is realistic, which can be implementable, and which will benefit the ecosystem in general?
So I just talk from a point of practicality. I lived abroad, I've been back in India 16, 17 years. And frankly, till 3 years, 2.5 years ago, the government did nothing.
Sorry?
The government did nothing till 2.5, 3 years ago. I think now it's announced such a huge slew of schemes, and it's still not doing anything. So my only advice would be, I don't want any new schemes. Even take the current schemes, cancel 80% of them, doesn't matter. But the 20% that's left, please execute them and make it happen. Do a few things, do them well, make a difference on the ground. That is possible. I don't need pie in the sky.
So what would you think of the existing schemes? What do you think are the best ones that should be implemented well?
Rather than talking about a specific scheme, so here's the thing, right? For the first 65, 70 years of our existence as a country, the government has always, to stay in power, to, broaden its electoral base, to do good or whatever, said we will back industries which create large employment. Until now, there were the Tatas and the Birlas and the Ambanis and the Adanis. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But now increasingly, that a TCS can't go from, 2 lakh people to 5 lakh people, right? Or whatever else it is. And, a Wipro can't grow from 1.5 lakh people to 3 lakh people. But you can have 15,000 startups, which grow from 10 people to 40 people each. Right? So I think the key thing is to really understand that startups are the new employment creator, are the new job creators, are the new place where actually, if you earlier focused on the big businesses, it's now time to give that focus to startups. And, like Mao said, let 10,000 flowers bloom, right? So if you now really, truly believe that entrepreneurship and startups are really the way that India is going to set itself apart, and not just go and, give somebody else, land at 47 paisa like Adani got in Gujarat, then what you want to do is say, okay, let me work with the sector. Let me see how I can create an enabling environment for 10, 20,000 companies to come up. Sure, half will fail. It's fine. But I will get my employment, I'll get my growth, and I'll get my world beaters from there. Right. So if you just look at this as the new job creation sector, as a new hot sector, as a new sector to get your votes, right? And give it that focus, the big companies will be fine. I don't think Mr. Tata needs help or Mr. Ambani needs help. But there's a bunch of youngsters who need help, or need an enabling environment. Just do that.
Right.
I think that's the only change in focus I asked for.
Manoj, you talked about issues like FDI and, so what would be your key 3 wish, if you were to have a wish list?
I think the burden of policy should not be there on startups. In my view, startups should be able to work without worrying about what policies they are, breaking and those kind of stuff. Because fundamentally, they are in a very challenging environment, and for them to worry about government whether they're breaking any law is something, they should not be worrying about. I think the burden of, and the ease of exits, acquisitions, right? The reason why US is such a healthy ecosystem is because it allows things to move very quickly, right, and very seamlessly. If I have to acquire a company, and if I have to exit a company, if I have to list a company, if I have to bring capital in the company, it's very easy. It's not very complicated. While in India is always a challenging thing, right? You have to talk to 10 lawyers. The VC is talking to 10 lawyers. Then you get a big,
So, the kind of challenges that you're talking about is probably faced by any sector. So, what's so special about the digital and startup eco? Why should this be done?
Can I just interrupt and maybe add something out there? Look, we're sitting in the Bombay Stock Exchange, right? This is where industries are grown. And if you look at even something like the US or the UK, a lot of the growth has really come from what I call the growth exchanges. It's not so much NYSE, but NASDAQ. Right. It's not so much big board, but AIM, right? So these are like the engines of growth. They have, knowledgeable investors, lower listing norms. You don't have to be profitable to go public like you have to be profitable to go public out here. So if you don't have exits, so even if you look at the entire digital as an ecosystem, we have some 80 or $100 billion that has come into India.
Right.
Only 45 billion has gone back. So as a country, we're a net minus 55%. Right? We haven't returned the money investors. How long do we expect FDI to come in if we don't allow it to go out? People put in money and they can do only so much on faith. At some point, the money has to come back.
Right.
So make it easier for loss-making companies to list and let knowledgeable investors list there. We don't have any such mechanism. We don't have a growth exchange in India. Right? There is an SME exchange here. There's, NSE has another, but that has maybe half a dozen companies. This has maybe 20. But even here, you have to be profitable.
Right.
And after a certain size, you have to go back and become a big board company, as opposed to like Microsoft and Google are still on NASDAQ.
Sure.
Right? They're worth $700 and $500 billion each. They're still on a growth exchange. So can we have, to take Manoj's point forward, an ability to have knowledgeable investors invest for full disclosure in loss-making companies? We are not, we don't need to be protected. I mean, investors don't need this namby-pamby handling.
Right.
Give disclosure, let it happen. Right? So that's my point on exit.
Yeah, definitely echo that, yeah.
Right.
So
I think a lot of
a flight of capital continuously happening, what Mahesh mentioned. So BSE has got something which is called high-tech, listing, which they are trying to do across. To find a company to so-called SEBI norms and get them listed itself is a challenge for them, right? So while SEBI has got market makers, profitability track, multiple of those strings. So all the startups which can really list in India are taking a listing outside somewhere. Right. So it's a flight of capital which is happening.
How much of this, you talked about listing. How much of this is also because entrepreneurs, not all, but some of them are afraid of these disclosures, where the money is going, the profits that they're making. Is that a reason that people are not coming forward for listing?
See, first of all, listing needs you to be profitable. Like, who's profitable there? Right? But that's not true in anywhere else in the world. You don't need to be profitable to list on NASDAQ. You don't need to be profitable to list on, the growth exchanges in the world. I'm saying you have a solid exchange. This is really a, edifice solid. So why don't we have a growth exchange where we have the dynamic, digital, high growth companies which invest in London, and you have knowledgeable investors say, I'm going to still take a bet, it's a loss-making company, but so what?
Right.
We don't have an ability to do that. We physically cannot list a loss-making company.
Right.
That means all startups are gone. I mean, forget the fact that startups have a 3-year profit tax holiday in the first 3 years. Which startup makes profit in the first 3 years? True. And what tax are you going to save from there? So this is a nonsensical announcement, right? It's like you saying, for every baby that's born, we'll give you free razor and shaving cream. But, first 3 years, how many babies need shaving cream?
Right.
You've given a soft which is meaningless.
So I think there is a common pattern in most of the regulation that exists in a financial technology or financial services so-called. That you're trying to protect a so-called investor or a so-called consumers who might get cheated, whether it's a second factor authentication, whether it's the loss-making companies. I think we're still living in about probably 2 decades old where we believe that the customer is too...
Yeah, the consumer is clueless, I have to be the nanny.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an overhang we are continuously seeing. Yesterday we were talking about a fintech, and most of the fintechs are in lending space. And they're still talking about operational challenges, trying to convert them into NBFCs. And my question to them was, do you think you can grow by being an NBFC? You just mentioned about compliances. I said, you will be just running around doing compliances. That's a reason other than banking. Everything else in the country in financial services is less than 10% penetration. Because it's simply not allowing innovation to happen in a new business model, in a completely borderless environment, in a completely, let's say, a simpler regulation. Just 1 minute. NBFC, there is a one interesting point I always shared. In some parliament committees where we've been representing these industries, we're saying that you want somebody who's lending to regulate as an NBFC. Why? What are the three fundamental risks? Here are these three risks. One is a person who's lending his capital. But people whose capital is being used or whose money is being borrowed, they clearly know that this person I'm giving money for lending, they've done their diligence. They're given on a terms, on a commercial term. What are you trying to prevent? So question number one, as long as very clearly known between the party who's lending and from where the money has been sourced, why are you really trying to intervene? Second risk, what happens to the interest rate? I said, here I understand your view that you don't want it to be overkill. What you really need is basis segment, ticket sizes, certain advisory that these are the ranges in which you should simply charge. And if you open up the sector, competition will take care of the percentages. Last point, if there is a person who's defaulted into let's say, one system, and he wants to now game the system by going to someone else, all you need to do is make sure there is a compulsory information sharing through the credit bureaus. What else you really need as a regulation? If you really need to go beyond 10% of a formal credit, do you really need NBFC structure to really lend money? Why? So unless we really question ourselves...
So just to add to Naveen, right, so I'm a avid investor since last 1.5 years in cryptocurrencies. We have not seen any altcoin coming out of India, while there are hundreds of altcoins which are existing, getting traded, solving purposes across board everywhere.
So Sanjay, actually, since you brought this subject, we have been personally and through Payment Council of India advocating digital currency in our country issued by central bank. That's the only solution. And first time a cryptocurrency report has, after 6 years, have mentioned, and including Vatan committee report, that yes, please look at it, this could be a solution. Actually, that's the only solution in our country, without which nothing else will work.
I remember there was a paper by RBI about a year back on something on this, but nothing has moved forward.
Now there is a report which has come out which has allowed them to think of doing a pilot. See, the problem is you're going to create huge risk for incumbents. There is a clearing houses, they will think that with the cryptocurrency coming in, central bank issued, you don't need clearing houses. So what happens to them? So then what happens, some of these institutions will try and create so-called insecurities in mind of central bank. If you don't understand the subject, and the nearest person whom we have been dealing, you'll ask him whose business is on threat, it will never happen.
Absolutely.
That's what is happening in every sector.
Right. And cryptocurrencies today, mind well, today, I would assume by 2020 very easily, all businesses will have their own wallets. They will start creating their own money. As this money gets more and more in circulation.
Exactly, it should be central bank issued currency, not everyone's.
What will happen is, people will, by 2025, people will start trusting business money more than government's money.
Right. So I think, there is also a bit of a crisis of confidence in RBI. The RBI under Raghuram Rajan is not the same as the RBI. This is now like a department, like a ministry of government where some junior minister, Urjit Patel, is in charge. Jo PM bolta hai, RBI karta hai. So I think we now have a bit of a crisis of confidence. For any of this to happen, I think you need extraordinary leadership under RBI to be able to come out and say we are now once again leading the country, leading the world, as opposed to trying to keep up to political demands at this point. Right. Just to talk a little bit about demonetization, I think
we'll come to that just a minute.
I wanted to add on
just want to take on Sanjay's point. You talked about this anomaly in the taxation of startups.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that, and what other steps do you think the budget can do to sort of propel this space?
So one is, clearly remove this 56(2)(7)(b) section where they are charging on that premium, right? So that I think has to be given away for sure. Secondly, getting the long tax holidays. As I've always been quoting across in media, saying that Infosys and Wipros would not have been there if those tax holidays would not have been given for that 10 or 15 or 20 years period. So today startups, you define, come open sector by sector, but within the startups, let's say fintech, right? It's changing a lot of stuff. Can you give, tax holidays for a 10-year, 15-year period, which can make a significant impact and build an industry?
Right.
So those are the kind of initiatives which needs to be taken with a long-term perspective. And secondly, as we say to all our funded companies or portfolio companies, it's all about execution, execution, and execution, which government is missing all along. Right. It's all about, creating business plans and not executing. So I think I would expect in this, budget, asking across those bureaucrats or whatever the vision of Prime Minister is there, to getting it executed, not just on paper.
Yeah. So there are 2 or 3 things on the budget expectation. One is, of course, this tax reform, and mine is more focused on a general unorganized retailer who is accepting a lot of cash. And today there is another controversy that keeps happening, merchant discount rate, the fee that he paid. So the simpler answer is curing a symptom, not the disease, which is that, okay, this person is not accepting digital payment क्योंकि उसको वो fees देनी पड़ती है. I think they are simply forgetting. By accepting cash, he is clearly deciding कि उस पर उसको tax देना है 35% या नहीं देना है. All you need to do is, okay, even if he wants to pay tax, his worry is, if I suddenly show my income, which I wasn't showing in cash, probably I'm opening up my potential income for last 10 years for a tax. There is a huge fear in their mind. Now, unless you really systematically do, for an example, which is a global practice, if you were, let's say, at a 10 lakh a month income level, you do next 10 lakh, your slab actually reduces for next 10 lakh. If you do another 10 lakh above that, it actually further reduces. How are you going to create an incentive for him to coming back into the tax fold, clearly start disclosing income, but with that, he actually gets a reduced tax incident where he just suddenly thinks, okay, 5% dena hai, my income anyway is more, as an aggregated level, I'm fine to pay it. So ultimately, you're curing a symptom of 1 to 2%. There's a huge debate, controversy, right from ministry to petrol ministry, everyone talking about it. No one's talking about that the real problem is the tax. So that needs to be reformed, otherwise you'll never have more people coming.
And we have Prime Minister threatening all of us, say, Azadi se hum nikalenge books.
So there are 2 more points that I wanted to. Second, of course, is the whole focus on interoperability, which has to come in, which has been recommended for payment systems, which is a big problem. Lastly, I think this whole issue about, we always say incentivize, digitize, but it never happens. You never see anything meaningful happening. Right. Now, the standard answer is that anything that's going to reduce our tax or create a visibility to lower tax revenue, we don't want to do it. Now, why not look at something like, let's say, a carbon credit kind of a model? Why not promote a behavior where, let's say, if your income, and in basis your income profile, if you have been spending 80% digital, if you're going to do it to 90, you get rewarded. If you, let's say, change in the same segment that 80% digital to, let's say, 70%, you're actually, let's say, surcharged for some percentages, and that's traded amongst those communities. So how do you create system which is self-funded, self-sustaining, and reward the behavior of a digital, and probably take some surcharges out of the physical cash behavior in different business, different walks of life?
Right. Also, from a consumer point of view, especially with, things like cashless payments and online transactions, is there enough awareness from the consumer point of view to get digital? As you mentioned, there are about 300 million mobile users. 70% of the population is outside the ambit of digital still. So your smartphones are expensive, your broadband is expensive, people don't know what to do with it.
So we've seen the impact out there. We've really seen the post 2 months, and I know you didn't want me to mention demonetization.
No, we will get into that. I know because that.
But I'm not using that. All I'm saying is, if you look at what's happened in the last 2 months, while apparently lots more people have come into the net, and now everybody's got their maids and drivers and all that registered. The point again is they don't know how to use it. Right? I have had to personally go with my maid twice to an ATM to tell her how to use it, because she doesn't know how to use it.
So the onus should be on the players, or should the government take up some responsibilities here?
I think some of it is basically, for example, she can't afford a net connection, right? So if you can make even, say, like I said, 100 MB, 1 GB free for everybody in India, it's going to cost nothing. Data is really cheap in India, and you can get the TRA or somebody to do something of that sort. I really believe what's happened is that you may have brought in more people into the net, but actually consumption has gone down, right? So I've seen that across, the retail outlets that I'm an investor in. Essentially, what was like 75 credit, 25 cash has become 97 credit, 3 cash.
Right.
Right. Suddenly, there's people are afraid to make all of what I say. Necessities are something I'm paying for, but things that I don't need to spend, I'm not spending on. Travel has gone down. All your discretionary spending has gone down. So I don't know when it will come back up. I think it's a long curve. We've had a huge jump. Everybody says it'll come up in 2 months. It won't. It'll take 2 years to come back, because we now have a learning cycle for all of these people to come to say, how am I supposed to do it?
In fact, on this, just to add, the day when government can put or close down all the railway reservation window, right? Where everybody is booking railway tickets on app. That's where we have arrived. If government can't do for booking a railway ticket for a common man, right, which is a regular affair, where there's tons of lines, every city or every small, we have got a challenge.
Even more telling, if government can't do it for its own political parties, political parties can collect cash, don't have to report, have no KYC and have no requirements. But a panwala down the street has all of these requirements. It basically means government is saying, "Main nahi kar sakta, tum log karo."
Right, right.
So in fact, I agree with Mahesh here that the whole problem is the whole government institution. Ultimately, railways is a government body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take oil companies is another example. If you take these two use cases, every consumer today in some ways touches these two services. And both are majority physical cash. However, good part, at least railway had shown past 10 years back that at least reservation, online reservation part, the reserved tickets, at least now more than 70-80% are digital. Unreserved with multiple options, we have not been able to solve it. Your platform tickets will not be able to solve it.
Still the lines are there at all the reservation windows.
But,
crazy.
But at least 80% value of the tickets is now actually happening. So at least there is a path which shows that it can happen if you put a might behind. The second problem is whenever government is involved, they don't want to pay for these services. So ultimately what is happening? There is a continuous discussion that you as a government body, when you do businesses, you don't want to pay for that service using your monopoly as that if you want me, you come, you give it free. Otherwise, customer is benefit, pass on the cost to him. And then it ties back to that you want to promote digital, but when you take physical cash, no questions asked, like you said, no charges levied, but you do digital, actually there are charges levied, and then there are a lot more information asked. Sure. So this is a huge disconnect that government itself being the consumption and being part of that digital, unless they digitize themselves,
right.
Unless they change that in a real, not just in the paper, but on the execution grounds, it won't happen.
There is an incentive. I mean, if this was all meant to be this thing against black money, everybody is now back on it. It's just black money with different currency notes. You go there, anybody says, "Sir, मैं cash में दूंगा." अब cash में दोगे तो मैं tax नहीं लगाऊंगा. We're back to the same old days, right? I'm not sure what black money has died somewhere. I mean, it's the color of black money has changed, so it's now pink black money instead of yellow black money. Right.
In fact, my point for the black money, it's more problem with the super white money.
Right.
What happens across is most of the corporates who don't have real business inflate, pay tax, and take government loans, bank loans. This is the super white money which is hurting India more than the black money. They should be tackling the super white money rather than the black money.
Right. So the general perception is that, if at all anybody is benefited out of the demonetization exercise, it is the digital ecosystem. Manoj, from your business.
I'm not so sure, Ma.
Yeah.
Have you not been hit by COD?
Yeah. I mean, coming to the demonetization, right? So COD is definitely a big portion of payments, and we have seen like 40% decline in the transactions in November and
his
December.
Artisans, the guys who are creating the handicrafts he sells, their income has fallen 40%.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you the stories from the ground, right? I travel a lot of villages. In last 30 days, I probably traveled 5,000 kilometers of India. The story in rural India is really pathetic. They believe that there's some kind of penalty has been imposed on them. No one is hearing about their story. Or the biggest thing they're telling is media doesn't want to talk about or horror stories. They have been bought kind of stuff. I'm telling you what they think, right? It's not my point of view. A lot of these artisans and the weavers I met, 70 to 80% decline in their sales. It's a wedding season. In Patani, for example, I was in Yevala for Patani sarees. Wedding series, they get a lot of orders. Not a single order. This season, not a single order. Think about these guys. They have poverty, and they have digital poverty, right? When I travel, getting internet is such a big issue. You go to highways, you go to villages, you don't get internet. How do you want to pay? How can you digitally pay anyway, right? A lot of these people don't even know bank accounts. They don't know where the checkbooks are. So basic thing like using bank account or not having a bank account, that I think the country has not even gotten to that. Maybe there's a way to leapfrog out of that. I don't know about that. But today the situation is that, there is, the digital infrastructure itself is not there. These are the stories, that, I can tell you from the ground.
Naveen, what's been your experience as a fintech operator? Are you seeing a lot of cashless transaction on your platform?
So actually it's been mix and month on month is changing. So if I take November itself, so we deal with real Bharat, so it's a mixed segment. You take services like money transfer, where a migrant person who was getting physical cash and then sending home, he uses our platform. So those declined drastically for last 2 months and now gradually coming back to the original level of September. Because simply there was no cash for them to be paid. Or in some extreme cases, they were actually paid 6 months in advance and they went in the queue and deposited it. So there's both sides of the story. Utility bills, it declined because you could use your old currency notes to go and pay utility bills. Again, same thing. People went rather into a queue, spend money there or pre-advance paid as much they could pay using that, so that digital decline. On the other hand, we saw a huge demand from, let's say, small businessman who was paying a salary or who had obligation to pay salary or pay reimbursement to his employees for expenses. They asked for a open loop prepaid card, which works actually just like debit card. So there was huge demand. There were foreigners coming into India. They needed to exchange their foreign currency. And all you could get was 4,000. How would they survive here? So they actually were given these cards to actually start spending. This fleet transport operators, who were actually giving literally 200,000 rupee a month for their expenses in a month. They started adapting for fuel payment, etc. to these cards. So it's been mixed. On the other hand, we saw, since we also have a large physical network to deal with people who really use physical cash to enter into a digital environment, those guys suddenly started asking for POS machines. So we saw huge growth in a demand for physical POS machine to accept digital. So it's a mixed bag. If I see, even if I look at the aggregated industry data on the payments, which is published by RBI and being in an association, we also have the visibility. November in terms of value actually was low. If you take debit card, credit card, wallet, everything else in a digital payment, value was low. Number of transactions grew, largely because of debit card transaction growing for a small value transaction. Like I said, all discretionary spends were actually down, so values were down. If I take December, I think started growing. If I take January, I'm already seeing a curve higher than what was there in October, and October specifically. And I will again remind that this industry actually was growing already at a 40% CAGR. So we're already on a growth curve. So it actually became a flat for a month and gradually coming back to the same growth curve. Our understanding is that the impact of this is actually more psychological at this stage than the real material impact. But medium term, we see that this 40% CAGR growth for the industry, debit, credit, wallet, payments, to actually move to 60 to 80% and eventually at 100%, provided the infrastructure part gets executed faster.
So taking conclusion related
but
to
Naveen, it'll happen in India, not in Bharat, to use those words. It'll happen more in India and not in that Bharat.
Well, this will happen in Bharat, but it takes time to execute it. Things don't happen overnight, so eventually it will happen in Bharat also.
Yeah, but what happens to those people till then? They don't have the physical cash infrastructure and they're not part of the
Absolutely bad situation. So what I've heard, again, we have presence in literally every district headquarter plus, 3,000 plus location. A lot of these people, because they are relationship driven, they simply move to credit. Till the time they had cash, so it was purely relationship. You needed some emergency transaction, because the guy knew it, he allowed you to do the transaction, till the time those had capacity to absorb those transactions. So they found their own ways now, whether you call credit a cashless or a digital, that's a question mark. They survived. But the reality is that there are people who were pained with these, and probably that's why the government needed them to be motivated that ultimately there'll be tax, etc., and some benefit that we saw.
Psychologically, what Naveen said across, right, it plays a lot. So today, India had just started spending, right? It was always a saving economy. Now people will hoard more, it will save more, and we will have more money getting saved across for trouble period. It's just going backward. I mean, getting back what was told by, I don't know, all the macro economists saying that we'll be within government saying that we'll be back on track by whatever first quarter. I don't see this happening another 4 quarters for sure. The economy is going to limp unless in this budget government comes out with something drastically to accelerate the velocity of money. Today, the money flow has stopped in every possible area.
So, yeah, I think what was originally meant to be 50 days will probably be 50 weeks or 50 months. That much I know. But even talking about things from the digital ecosystem, if I look at the amount of startup funding, it's fallen off the roof, right? Yes, partly we are responsible because we had ridiculous startups with overvalued, valuations and stuff. So Tiger has gone and the other big guys have gone, but nobody else has come in, right? We are not seeing, even SoftBank, it's raised, 100 billion. I haven't really seen any plans for that money to come into India. So, and when I talk to them, because I'm always talking to these guys overseas, they're out there saying, we don't know what's happening, right? That Vodafone case that I can go back anytime into the past and tax anything I want, says, guys, I mean, like, is there no sanctity? Can't you go past and say, if you can change any law retrospectively to 50 years ago, what does it mean? And like, if the Prime Minister says, I'll tax you from 1947 onwards, who has any clarity? There's 196 countries to invest in. We are not the only one. Yeah, we may be growing, we may have a large population, but we've all been hit, consumption's been hit, and suddenly this is insecurity. And, for example, RBI, had 60 announcements in 35 days.
Right. Yeah.
It probably had 60 announcements in the last 35 months. But every day it was left, right, left, change. Yeah, today you can deposit, today 2,000, tomorrow 2,400. Yes, it's back to 2,000, 4,000, 4,500, 10,000, 2,000. It kind of suddenly nobody, essentially what somebody wants to see is a stable monetary policy, a stable reserve bank, something that you can depend on, right? Now I don't have any fish to fry, but I have sensed foreign investors are skittish now, right? They're not really coming back in droves. A few will come, right? But again, I think a large part of what we need to do, is to offer stability, to offer predictability, and not this, I can change my law to do anything I want, right? This entire lie that we're all stable has been kind of proved wrong by the fact that we changed 60 laws in 35 days, right? Obviously now the RBI is a handmaiden of the government, right? A sock puppet of the government. Government can today say, so anybody with a name, with the same first name and last name, Thomas, your tax is 100% from 1947. What can you do? It can go change the law tomorrow, right?
Right.
So essentially, I think what we've lost is psychological, to take Naveen's point. We've lost the entire idea of a stable, growing economy under predictable leadership with a predictable set of policies. We've kind of gone into some voodoo land.
It's like releasing the software and then putting in patches. अरे ये टूटा, इधर से ये टूटा, put in a patch. Nothing is stable, right? You don't know what will break at what point in time. There's nothing thoroughly tested before releasing.
And in the entire bureaucracy of the system that's been working, sure, it may be crappy and sure, it may be corrupt. But that bureaucracy has been replaced by the fact that suddenly everything in the country is run by Niti Aayog and DIPP. You want anything, it is Niti Aayog and DIPP, which are kind of extra governmental institutions, right? And with CEOs. So what do the ministers stand for? Nobody knows. What do the government and the bureaucracy stand for? Nobody knows. Suddenly the country is being run by two institutions which are 2 years old. All right? All policy is at Niti Aayog and DIPP. And then it becomes unpredictable. Now you bring nationalism into this thing, right? What business did a finance secretary have of telling Amazon, I'm warning you, watch out, right? Like that company is bringing 5 billion. I'm not invested in that company is bringing 5 billion into India. If somebody in Canada is selling something to Canadians, what's your problem? Right? This is Kida for no reason at all, right? This is the finance secretary you don't go around threatening companies. And suddenly, those companies have a choice, yeah? They say, "Theek hai bhaiya, main nahi aunga."
Manoj, do you sense a similar concern or worry as far as the investor community is concerned when you talk to investors or potential fundraising? Are you sensing this lack of stability as a concern that they flag?
I think that's a very valid point, the lack of stability, the predictability. Right? Investors, as Mahesh rightly pointed out, we are not the only country. We're not the golden bird that everyone wants to go after, right? We have to lure them. We have to say, okay, you will get this return, and we ensure that you will get this return, right? If you keep changing things, that doesn't help the investors because anyways they put small amount of money from a global pool, like 1-2%. That also they will take away, and so I think the key ask is that give investors a clean way of coming in and clean way of going out. Just make them feel that we value you, and we will make that happen. Otherwise, Otherwise, it's going to be the same story, right?
Yeah, I just said, 2 years ago, China stopped being flavor of the month, and 2, 3 years ago, and India started being more and more flavor of the month around the world. We gained a huge amount of global momentum.
Right.
But we've lost that, right? And hence I'm saying it's not a 50-day thing. It may not even be a 50-week thing. It's going to take us a long time of predictable, stable, volatile behavior, right? Markets can be volatile. Governments can't be volatile, right? For people to have the confidence that, yes. The only thing I can help is, that can aid in the fact is that we have even more volatile leadership in the US. Somebody will say, wahan pagal hai, yahan pagal hai, which, kaun se pagal ke piche paise lagao? I think we may actually come down to that, which is, relatively less volatile. So I think the only good thing that's happened lately is the Trump one. So people will think even more about the United States as a problem.
See, I have a slightly different view here. My view is that our country has never depended or grown only on the government and the politics and all that happens. I think it's our real resilience of we as an Indian or Bharat or whatever you call. Even when demonetization happened, everyone thought, 50 दिन में इतना पैसा आएगा भी क्या? Reality is वो सारा पैसा जा चुका है वहाँ पे. How, what? I think people have found their own ways, whether you call it jugaad, money has reached there. I personally believe that basis the data that I see every day, and again, as I said, mix of Bharat, by March, and again, we also live happily in India because we also have a short memories. I won't be surprised by March all this becomes a past. And let's see what happens post-UP election. A lot of things will change basis that and the equation in the government, what they do and what they don't do.
It may not even take that long. Already the national debate is no longer on demonetization. It is about cows are inhaling oxygen and exhaling oxygen.
So you already said it.
Right?
Okay. And you will...
Matter of national debate.
I'm going to open the floor to the audience. If anybody's got a question, please go ahead and ask the panelists here.
Come on, guys. Show us you've been awake. Kuch to pucho.
Yes, please go ahead, sir. Can somebody give a mic there?
So when you're talking of digital Bharat, I was part of the Bharat at some point in time. The POS machine that is to be made use of by the business correspondents, like that Fino, etc. One person has raised the point, there is no power or electricity to charge these POS machines. Then how will we be able to take the digital portion of it to the real Bharat? 65% of the country lives in the rural area. Particularly, the position is very pathetic. Unless these kind of infrastructure definitely improves, mere digital India cannot be translated into digital Bharat, number one. Number two, so he has raised the point about the MDR for these petroleum companies that are being charged, that petroleum minister is making the announcement. He can make the announcement on behalf of petroleum companies. He cannot make the announcement on behalf of the commercial banks because mostly 80% of the banking is done by the scheduled government banks.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the private shareholders are also there in that company. It means I got to be put into loss as a shareholder. Then where is the shareholder value accretion when I am putting the money in this companies? I think there should be a position to tell, there should be an arm's length approach between the government and these government companies. Otherwise, in a sustainable model, nobody will be there is no charity in economics.
It
That
looks
is-
like a comment more than a question.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yes.
No problem. I think
This
this
is
is
the two
goes
things.
back to what...
Is there a question, sir, from any
No,
of us?
the question is, just you are also raising points other than the budget. That's why these two things came to the mind. One is this POS machines not even being in a position to be charged. Second, this MDR being a thing. These are the two things I thought that I would be in a position to supplement. Thank you.
So it's just a comment that he was making,
Yeah.
so which is fine.
No, I think we agree
Yes,
with
sir.
this comment.
What industry players like yourself can do. I find, and I've been watching Indian businesses for a long time now, 30 years as a journalist. Everybody expects the government to do everything. If you take digitization, you have to have, I fully agree with you there, unless you have proper financial and digital literacy, you're opening up the possibility of far more pain. But, can the government just, do this? I don't think so. Players never invest in their own future as well. You take, a simple thing, India's got the world's worst drivers. We've got one of the world's highest accident rates, which means the insurance sector is taking a huge hit on automobile and accident insurance. But I don't see insurance companies investing in training better drivers. So what can the industry do?
So if I can just, I'll start with a generic answer saying I believe there are three modes of engagement with any stakeholder: lead, follow, or get out of the way. Right? I can deal with any of these three. Either you lead, I will follow. Either you let me lead, you follow, or you get out of the way. We have in the government a party that doesn't do any of these three. It leads but does not get out of the way. It doesn't follow, right? So there is a limited amount of what we can do, right? Yes, you can lead, but you don't execute on the ground, and you put up 5 more roadblocks. We've seen that. After news worth 100 crore rupees of publicity, we have 5 companies that have qualified for the 3-year tax holiday, 5, right? Out of 15,000 startups in India. So we obviously know that there is a gap. So I mean, it's a very simple business thing. If I'm a businessman, and when I deal with somebody else, I just, or with an employee, say, lead, follow, get out of the way. There's nothing else, right? If you're obstructionist or whatever, then you're not helping. Either you listen to me, or I'll listen to you, or you step out of my path. But none of these three happen. Now, when it comes to people not investing in the ecosystem, I think people do what's right for them. The companies that, like a State Bank of India that had to grow has invested deeply in the banking correspondent, ecosystem and done what it had to. All the companies that are funding at the rural level in terms of, the social, the loan giving companies and stuff, they've done a reasonable, they had to do what they have to do. Because I think people, as long as you understand in basic economics, people work to their benefit, they'll do it. But it has to be a benefit, right? If I don't see a benefit, why would you expect me to work? I mean, how much pure CSR with no benefit do you expect me to do, right? For example, I mean, like we said, I mean, there's no digital coverage, there's no internet coverage in large swaths of India. How do you expect people to do digital banking? How do you expect people to do digital, so what do you expect me to do? Should I go and put up cell towers in rural India? I can't. So, all we are saying is, okay, if you're a government, give us enabling infrastructure. Just give us bandwidth. You want digital India, no? Cover India with digital, no? Right? So either you incentivize the companies putting up towers, or you do it up yourself through MTNL, BSNL, or something. Just give us infrastructure, leave the rest to us. If you don't give us the infrastructure, and we only put up the infrastructure where, we have 500 towers in Bandra, I'll work in Bandra. Right? We will follow, I mean, at some point, I mean, insurance company cannot go putting up cell towers. So at some point, you have to figure out what is the infrastructure you can use. It's literally they're saying, if you don't build a road, how can I go and develop a village out there? Build a road, now let me do the rest. At least put these central things. And, roti, kapda, makan, now bandwidth is the next thing, right? Give us that. Give that coverage. Bring this billion people online, and then magic can happen.
See, what happens across while, all of us are here talking about how ease of doing business should be done by government, making the whole environment so conducive so that more entrepreneurs can flourish across. Having said that, will people stop doing business? No, everybody will do. So for example, I have an investment in a company called Zipper. It's a short code for address. It's an 8-digit where it can define your basic address. What happened across with them, because they are working with government. So in Hyderabad, they could cover across the complete homes, digitizing their home addresses with this. It's like Aadhaar for dwelling for homes. Now, is this replicable across India? Yes, it is. Does all the government are proactively doing it? Very few. Idea is that can solve a lot of citizen services. So if you've got power problems, just call saying that this is my zipper code, please send. I don't need to explain that 4-digit address because our PIN codes and that systems are broken. Finding an address becomes very difficult. In land records, every places. So it's a basic starting place for a smart address and a smart city. Now, very obvious with this startup that this can become like a next Google where it can really define the basic infrastructure for address. Now, is government doing everything to adopt or work across? It's very difficult to work with governments. So idea is, while entrepreneurs are even creating this kind of disruption, it's difficult for startups to engage with governments.
So our views, I think industry players' job is to find need gap analysis and fill that gap. That's what we have always been doing in every situation, being an industry player as well. There are multiple examples, even during demonetization, that a lot of people created innovation which wasn't there. Simple example, we never saw QR code at the bhajiwalas, right? And it started with the P2P transfer, but it resulted into we all forcing also government to create a category for merchant wallets, which wasn't existing, right? And it happened in a record time of 7 days that you can formally, without paperwork, become a merchant, start accepting money digitally. There was a helpline created just to educate people if you want to take POS, if you want to take any wallet, if you want to take any instrument. Again, in about 7-10 days' time, that helpline was getting created. I've heard that in a week's time, hundreds and thousands of calls have come just for people to understand. I usually don't believe in this financial education bit. It's all actually social. Nothing really gets achieved. But I believe that when there is a need, that time you inform that person, and if he's able to use that information and do it, experience it, that stays on. You do it like an academic session, you forget. It's like a language. You don't use it, it's actually of no use. You waste a lot of money. So every time there is a demand or a gap created, you actually fill that with information, with product, with services. You actually create and grow the industry. I also realized that probably we were not telling what government needs to do. We were talking a lot more about what they shouldn't be doing or where they need to stop. So I think they understand it. Probably different situation, different goals than what we are perceiving and thinking. You understand it.
This government's stated goal is less governance, less government, more more governance. I think the opposites are, we have far more government and governance coming into everything we're doing. I think that's one issue. But again, it really comes down to what do we want. I mean, I don't believe in anarchy and no government. I'm saying you do the stuff.
Yeah.
Do it and leave the rest. I mean, make sure if there's somebody who's doing something illegal, corrupt, put them in jail. But that's not happening either, right? The guys with like the biggest amount of disclosed black money were the BJP politicians. Not a single guy was arrested, right? So suddenly this entire thing of digital has become very politically linked.
Yeah.
And now it's this entire thing. My friend Vijay Shekhar runs Paytm. So, well, he's now seen as a government guy. And he furiously is not, right? So I think at some point you've got to de-link nationalism and party politics from what's happening in the country. You say, okay, my party has a stand, but this we're doing for the country. I mean, remember that 32% of people voted for you, 68, 69 did not. So don't assume that 100% voted. Keep politics out of digital, right? Do whatever is right. Don't color everything and like I say, Amazon, I threaten you, don't do business. Hey, yeah, come on. Grow up, man. I mean, be a real country. Stop being a tin pot dictatorship.
Yeah. So exactly, I'm saying we were talking what they shouldn't be doing. Yeah. We were not talking what they need to do.
Great. Thanks for your great insights. I think we have had a fascinating discussion. Unfortunately, we run out of time. I'm sure we could have done another hour of this discussion. Maybe we can continue this offline. So thank you, everybody. I'll hand it back to Padma.
Thank you, Thomas. As a token of our appreciation to all our panelists, we'd like to present them with mementos. Thomas, if you will do the honors. Mr. Sanjay Mehta, thank you, sir.
Government never does anything without having a political motive.
Mr. Naveen Surya.
Thanks a lot.
We always do it, we forget.
Mr. Mahesh Murthy.
Thanks, Mahesh.
Mr. Manoj Gupta.
Thanks, Manoj.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Every government here is always winning the next election. That's it.
I'd like to invite Mr. Sajesh
Nothing else.
Raghavan, business
You know it, I
head,
know it.
the Hindu Business Line, to give the vote
वो
of
change होने
thanks.
वाला भी नहीं है. Like you said, completely great discussions.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, first of all, for joining us. You've been a great audience. Almost sitting there and listening to this conversation unfold almost set me into a sense of deja vu, right? Because 2 years back when we decided to put this whole platform together, we were staring at the whiteboard to define what is the reason we would like to do this, right? listening to both the conversations today on infrastructure and digital, we were almost able to, I could also almost sense the teleprompter, auto typing, couple of things, right? Number one, the objective of this platform was to be able to table our views. And I think we saw that adequately across both the sessions. Number two was to give a platform for all of us to be able to dissect specific, large, complex challenges that we see from an economic standpoint, and be able to slice and dice and understand this better. So that I thought was ticked in our mind. Thirdly, of course, as a media house, it's our responsibility to give adequate air cover to most of the conversations that happened, and be able to share the views that we heard in the spaces where it most matters, right? The power corridors. So I'm personally very delighted to be able to have this platform created. They call me a South Indian with a Punjabi twist because in our place we never have gratitude which is silent, right? So therefore I'm also delighted to thank a bunch of people, and I would like you to give me a loud cheer when we speak about some of the names here. Our partners, most importantly, Shriram Transport Commercial Vehicle Finance. Mr. Revankar is not here, MD and CEO. He'll probably be with us tomorrow on the next panel. He's the second, this is the second year in a row that he's partnered with us, and I'm really delighted to have a partner of his stature. We have LIC Housing Finance, and we must thank them for supporting us in this cause. Our session partners, GIC and ESC, for facilitating. Most importantly, the panel, it's only become richer by the year. This is the second year in a row that we're conducting this. I almost thought it was a coffee conversation happening, 5 friends sitting and conversing, right? I am only thanking our stars that we do not have the executing body, the government mechanism sitting here. We would have probably seen a digital Star Wars unfold here, right? On that note, my colleagues from the editorial side, thank you very, very much for helping us put this thing together. My colleagues from the business side, we couldn't have put this together without all your help and support across the country. Thank you very, very much for that. My colleagues from the circulation side, who ensure that the newspaper reaches you on time every day, every single morning, right? So thank you all for having been here. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you. We're serving lunch now, so I'd request all of us to have lunch with us before we leave. Thank you.
I'd like to announce that tomorrow we have another 2 rounds of panel discussions. The first will be on banking and financial sector, and the second on the manufacturing sector. So we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you. Have a nice day.